everyone. Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5-Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Good evening, Rush Nation. Also, you say good evening. It's an old habit. It's good morning. It's good morning, fantasy football. It's been on a bit of hiatus. I had some leave. I spent some time with my family. So August, I normally am sort of in the midst of everything. And it's the first year that my son has school holidays. So can't really keep that schedule anymore. And I hadn't taken any time off all year. So I took some time away. I spent some time with my family. And if we lose listeners for that, I don't care. Hopefully not. But if we have, then so be it. We're here. We're week 1. We're here for the season, and I can't believe it. It's, as always, I get surprised and get to this time of year, and we're here, and we're just preparing for the start of the next 17, 18 weeks of the NFL season. We've got so much to look forward to and plan, and it's an exciting time, and I can't wait for Sunday to get here. But it also means that we got to get to work, right? We've got to bring these ships home to the harbour, and we start with the waiver wire for week 1. So I guess before I do that, some format. Good Morning Fantasy Football is going to be pretty much every day, Monday to Friday, where possible. Yes, it's been a bit of hiatus, but I'm going to try and do them. So in the waiver wire week 1, I'm going to do. Or in the Good Morning Fantasy Footballs, there's going to be waiver wires, start sits, and if there's any questions, you can leave them in the YouTube comments, and I'll happily answer any comments for start sit. So leave them in this video or any of our other videos. Tomorrow's will be on start sit, so leave any start sit questions in the YouTube comments, and I will have a look at those and make sure that we get to those and answer them. I'll also be doing wide receiver matchups, and I'll be doing a condensed version of our matchup show. So there's quite a lot of content, basically what we've done over the past, but they're all going to be in the sort of morning format, a bit shorter, a bit more succinct, but giving you that advice. And then Stocks and I will be doing the flagship, and we'll be doing the flagship on Tuesdays. So tonight, Stocks and I will be recording, and we'll be preparing everything. We'll answer questions. We'll prepare the strategy for the season, and we'll be putting together the plan for what we'll be doing for the season, and we'll be accompanied with some great guests along the way and everything else in between. So it's going to be a really exciting time. I'm really looking forward to this season and all the content that we're going to produce. So let's talk about week 1. So we do have waiver wire picks for week 1. Some drafts are still ongoing. I'm still got a couple left. So I hear you. But these are specifically looking at drafts that have happened, or if you're thinking about streaming options, then we're going to put these together for you. And the first one we're going to do is in quarterback. So the first one here is Will Levis. He's 18% owned on ESPN. He's 26% owned on Sleeper. Now, Will Levis has got a heck of a supporting cast around him. He's got Calvin Ridley. He's got DeAndre Hopkins. He's got Tyler Boyd around him. So he's got a huge ability to get plays downfield. He also led all quarterbacks last year in deep pass rates. So 22% of his passes were thrown for over 20 air yards. So he likes to get the ball downfield. He likes to be vertical. But with a new OC in town, new coaching staff in town, they're convinced that they can get the best out of Will Levis. He should be a fun and exciting player to have. So if you're looking at your week 1 options, you don't have one of those elite quarterbacks, you're thinking about stream, or you're thinking about rostering a backup, Will Levis is probably a really good bet to go for. Another bet to go for is indeed Baker Mayfield. So he's 32% owned on Sleeper. He's on ESPN. He's 42% owned on Sleeper. Baker Mayfield has a really interesting start to the season. So he's got a home game against Washington, which you'd expect them to be favorites, and you would expect them to do reasonably well in that game. So you might not see huge passing volumes in week 1. He's away at Detroit in the Dome week 2, so you expect them to throw the ball a fair amount there. Then they've got Denver. You would expect them to get success against in that passing game there. Philly, which they beat them handily in the playoffs, but that could be a different proposition. That could be potentially a high-scoring game, so you could see Baker Mayfield throwing the ball at that. Atlanta in the Dome, again, you'd expect them to be passing the ball a lot, so you could see a lot of vertical movements there. At New Orleans, a place the Buccaneers have always struggled. You can expect to see them pass the ball a lot there. And then Baltimore at home, which again could be a game that they could be behind on and trail and will need to pass the football. So there's a lot of games there where you can see a lot of passing volume to be had by Baker Mayfield. So if you're looking for a backup option for the first 5 to 7 weeks of the season, or you're looking for a streaming option, Baker Mayfield's a pretty good one, especially with that schedule to start the season with. Both these guys, from a fab perspective, I'm not spending loads on a backup quarterback. No more than 1 or 2% is what you need here. There'll be plenty of guys on the waiver wire you can go after, but these two, cement them early if you haven't got a backup or if you're thinking of an alternative. Let's move into running backs. Samaje Perine is probably the pickup of the week. He's 3% owned on ESPN. He's 7% owned on Sleeper. Now, we heard the news this week that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be missing at least 4 games, and it could be longer. We also know that the Chiefs earlier in the season wanted Josh Jacobs. It's a reason why I've been telling people to fade Isaiah Pacheco. I'm not convinced Isaiah Pacheco is going to get the workload people seem to think he is. They've invested heavily in their passing attack in the draft and in free agency. They've just brought Juju back. They clearly want to get more vertical with the football with Patrick Mahomes, which you can makes a lot of sense. But then as well, you've got this void of Jerick McKinnon has kind of gone, and I expect Samaje Perine to fill that role. I really like the looks of Samaje Perine. I actually think he could be a really valuable back here in this offense. I think he could be the goal line back. I think he's going to get a lot of work in the passing game. I don't see this role being exclusively Pacheco's. And again, I think the fact that they wanted Josh Jacobs is also kind of telling you that they're not all in on Isaiah Pacheco, contrary to belief. So buy in on Perine. He's going to be a great next guy up. He's going to have a great opportunity to thrive. And we've seen Jerick McKinnon be fantasy relevant in this offense. So it's definitely a guy I would be picking up in as many places as you can. Another guy I'd be picking up is Jordan Mason. He's 26% owned in ESPN leagues, 28% owned on Sleeper. He's the clear number 2. CMC didn't play any of the preseason. There's a calf injury there that could limit him in week 1 potentially. It might not. We don't know. But this is a 28, 29-year-old back that has had injuries in the past. So you want to get the next guy up in a really, favorable rushing offense. And that is going to be the 49ers. So picking up Jordan Mason here in leagues is a very prudent move. So I'd be getting Jordan Mason where you can if you haven't already got him and he's available in your league. Both these guys, I'd be willing to splash a little bit of fab on, up to 5% of fab to get them. I know it seems a lot for an early pickup, but if you get an injury week 1, these guys become a lot more relevant. They become a lot more expensive as it goes along. So if you can pick them up for 5% or less of fab, you know your league better than I do. I wouldn't necessarily go crazy, but I think an under 5% fab or up to a 5% of fab bid is a good one. Another running back here is Marshawn Lloyd. Now, Marshawn Lloyd is most likely out for week 1. So this could be a great opportunity to buy a running back really low. He's 40% owned on ESPN. He's 29% owned on Sleeper. So you could get him probably for $1 or even a $0 bid because it looks likely he's going to be out. But he is the number 2. AJ Dillon is out for the season. We know they're committed to Josh Jacobs, and that makes complete sense. And it's not a huge backup role, but we've seen in the Packers that there has been a backup role that has been marginally fantasy relevant, maybe a bit under that. But we also know Josh Jacobs isn't as effective in the passing game, and Marshawn Lloyd might be. And he's a guy with 4.4 speed. He can make guys miss. But also he's the next guy up. He's worth a fab bid. And this week you can get him in a supreme discount because he's unlikely to play this week. So if you've got the space to the roster room, you can move players to a PUP or IR, then, Marshawn Lloyd's a good one to pick up for a $1 or so. Let's move to the wide receivers here. One guy I really liked in the draft process is Adonai Mitchell, 28% owned on ESPN, 43% owned on Sleeper. You've got Josh Downs, who I talked about a few weeks ago, was looking like the guy. He's currently injured. If you look at Dwayne McFarland's utilization report on Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life, you're able to see the kind of utilization he's been getting. He's played a huge amount of snaps, but He's played predominantly in a slot, which is where Josh Downs plays, but also he has also taken on 12 personnel role, which moves aside Alec Pierce completely. And so when that happens and you look at it, you're thinking this guy is going to be quite relevant in the Shane Steichen offense. There's a pathway to him being relevant. We don't have a clear number 2 here behind Michael Pittman. And so Adonai Mitchell looks to be a guy who could accelerate. Now, I don't want to sit here and bet the house on him. He's a raw rookie prospect who has a lot to learn. But there's a pathway to him being highly fantasy relevant because he's going to start as the starter. It's going to be up to Josh Downs to get that job back. And we don't know how long he's out for. And we don't know how Adonai Mitchell's going to do. If Adonai Mitchell has a really big game, it's going to be really hard. So I like having the guy who's going to start up front and then see if he's got the job to gain or lose. We can go crazy on the fab, couple of percent. Don't think you need more than that. But he's a guy I think you should be having an eye on over the coming weeks and a guy you can take a punt on quite cheaply here. Another guy who might not be available in most leagues, but he is available in over half is Josh Palmer. He's 37.1% owned on ESPN. He is 46% owned on Sleeper. So there is a lot of availability on Josh Palmer. I think he's the one in. I've been talking about this for weeks. I think he's the one in LA. You can make the argument, oh, well, they're going to run the ball more. And they've got Justin Herbert. They're going to pass the ball fine. It's not going to be like a ridiculous volume, but they're going to pass the ball. They have to get vertical. 19 runs, 70%. So there's going to be passing volume, and there's got to be a number 1. So I think it's going to be Josh Palmer. I think Josh Palmer's going to be the one. I think he's the incumbent. He knows that. I mean, as much as he doesn't know the system, he's the guy they chose to keep out of Allen and Mike Williams and everyone else. That says a lot to me that they like his skill set. They like what he can do. He's had fantasy relevant weeks. He knows the players. So I like, he's got the relationship with Herbert. I think you can acquire Palmer and, you stick him on your bench week 1, see how he goes. But I expect that role. I think he's going to be a fantasy worthy player from the off. I think if you can get him 5% or under a fab, and I think it's an absolute steal. So I wouldn't go crazy, but I think he's a player you need to add on your roster pretty quickly. Tight ends, for me, there's only one guy I want to own, which is Noah Fant. He's 32% owned on ESPN. He's 16% owned on Sleeper. Noah Fant has seen Colby Parkinson leave. He's seen Will Dissly leave. That was almost all of his competition has pretty much gone. So you're looking at over 70 vacated targets to the tight end position that have just disappeared. And so you add a good chunk of those to what he did last season. He's going to be a fantasy relevant tight end. The number 2 on the roster is Pharaoh Brown. I mean, I had to look that up because it's just, there's nothing behind him now as there was previously. He's done well in camp. I talked about it in the camp wrap up. I think he's a player I'd be acquiring. I have been acquiring as a tight end. I feel pretty comfortable that I can even start him as my tight end 1 and punt the position completely because I think the volume's going to be there to support him. So he's worth a fab bid. I don't think he's on anyone's radars. I think it's just me. I feel like it's just me. I don't hear anyone talking about him or speaking about him or telling you to pick him up anywhere. But I've gone everywhere and I've talked about him. So 1 to 2% of fab. I think you can pick him up and you'll be in a great spot. I don't talk about kickers. It's not for any other reason that there's going to be kickers in your league. We don't know what the great matchups are going to be yet. Pick a kicker that's in a dome or at home. That's the rule. If you need a kicker for week 1. Defenses here, if you want a sort of short-term streaming option, the Chargers is a really good one. They've got the Raiders, the Panthers, and the Steelers in their opening 3 games. That's 3 offenses that look like they're going to struggle. Especially at the start of the season where they're trying to put stuff together. They're 5% owned on ESPN. They're 7% owned on Sleeper. John Harbaugh, you got John Harbaugh's pretty well known on defense. He's got the ability to do that. Sorry, Jim Harbaugh. I get his Harbaugh brothers mixed up quite considerably. So I think I'd be looking at that and be going, okay, let's get the Chargers for the first few weeks. Their schedule gets pretty bad onwards, but this is a team that you can spend sort of $0 to $1 to maybe even $2. I wouldn't spend $2, $0 to $1 on. You can pick them up. They have a really good opening 3-game schedule against the Panthers in particular. The Panthers were giving up 11 points per game last year. to fantasy defenses. So that's a good one to go and target. And then on that reason, I've picked the Saints. So if they're available in your league, they're 48% owned on ESPN. They're 32% owned on Sleeper. But yeah, Carolina week 1. This is a good defense that puts on points. Most games they were averaging sort of 9-10 points a week. And then they're playing Carolina, who gave up 11 points per game. There's some playmakers that can turn the ball over. I really like them as a pickup this week, so go ahead and pick them up. If you got it, again, I wouldn't spend mega fab, $1, fine amount of fab. So that's going to do it for the waiver wire for week 1. So show tonight, we'll get you ready for the season. Make sure you set those lineups. I like to set my lineups well in advance of Thursday. Get them all set up. Get your waiver wires in and submitted. Get your rosters all set up. Get those players on IR. Get your taxi squad sorted in Dynasty. And then where you're going to see my ranks, you're going to see my ranks on Patreon. You'll see them there. I haven't got anywhere. They're on Fantasy Pros. If you can find them and see my ranks, if you can find out the way to do that, then you can. People have asked me about the website. We haven't got a new hosting provider. Our previous one ripped us off for quite a bit of money. So we need to find a new hosting provider to sort that out. So we will get that sorted. But effectively, for right now, I will send people copies of my ranks if they want them. But the best way to get all the projections and the projection seats are on Patreon. So it's patreon.com/5yard rush. That is there. We'll be back tonight to talk about fantasy football. Tomorrow we'll do some start sits. So make sure you put those comments in there in the YouTube comment for this video, and I'll pick them up and answer any of those questions tomorrow. If you're listening to this on the podcast version, then just pop over to YouTube, hit subscribe, and just drop us the question on there. Don't even need to watch the show. I'd obviously love it if you did. But I know a lot of our listeners are old school YouTube podcast listeners, because that's where we started. That's where we've been for nearly 8 years, and that's great. And I'm not telling people to change their habits, but you can pop over to YouTube and you can write a comment in there, hit the subscribe button while you're there. That really helps out. Hit the like button as well. That also really helps us out with interactions and things through there. But it's just a good medium to cache those questions. So do that through there. I will be back later on tonight and then tomorrow. But until then, Rush Nation, don't forget, as always, keep rushing.